In other news, Aboriginal protesters have been rallying across Canada over the past several weeks. The campaign has been gaining momentum day by day. Nationwide rallies started when the prominent Aboriginal chief, Theresa Spence, launched a hunger strike in December. She began eating normally last week, but pledged that protests will continue until the government takes concrete steps to improve their living conditions.
Aboriginal protesters have been rallying across Canada over the past several weeks. The campaign has been gaining momentum day by day. Nationwide rallies started when prominent Aboriginal chief Theresa Spence launched a hunger strike in December. She began eating normally last week, but pledged that protests will continue until the government takes concrete steps to improve their living conditions. In a matter of hours, Aboriginal groups and their supporters will put their plans to mount pressure on the government of Prime Minister Stephen Harper in practice. Supporters of Idle No More, a protest movement campaigning for the rights of Aboriginal peoples in Canada, will rally in at least 30 Canadian cities on a global day of action. Similar events have been organized in other countries, including Sweden, Australia, and the United States. Organizers say the day of action is meant to protest the Canadian government's attacks on democracy, Indigenous sovereignty, human rights, and environmental protection.
Around the world, human beings are recognizing that Canada's government doesn't respect human rights, and in particular as it pertains to Canada's Indigenous peoples, and will be mobilizing to effectively protest Canada's government.
But what are the grievances and complaints of the Aboriginal communities? Native groups say they are living in degrading conditions. They want a fairer share of federal revenues. Canada's First Peoples are asking for better living conditions on reservation lands allotted to them, where native populations have to deal with tough conditions, ranging from unsafe drinking water and inadequate housing to addiction and high suicide rates. And they are protesting against legislation that affects Aboriginal lands and rights. They say the government passed the law without consulting First Nation communities.
Section 35 of the Canadian Constitution is unambiguous. It says that Aboriginal and treaty rights are hereby recognised and affirmed, and that is the supreme law of Canada. And yet the Harper government appears to be more interested in the profits of mining companies and oil companies who view Canada's Aboriginal peoples as an obstacle to their resource development.
Aboriginals have shown through coordinated protests in the past weeks that they are determined to pursue their rights, and that Ottawa could pay a high price for continuing to defy their demands.
Israel is breaking its own rules on the use of deadly force against unarmed protesters. That's according to an Israeli rights organization.
This report exposes for the first time the full list of crowd control weapons used by the Israeli security forces in the West Bank regarding Palestinian demonstrations. Weapons like tear gas, rubber-coated bullets, the skunk, stun grenades.
B'Tselem has said Israeli forces have killed at least 56 people since 2005 in clashes with barely armed Palestinians. The NGO has accused Israeli security forces of extensively and systematically violating rules that bar deadly retaliation for non-lethal assault. Based on those rules, live ammunition should not be fired at protesters. Over the past 2 weeks alone, Israeli forces have shot dead 2 Palestinians in the occupied West Bank in protests, which Tel Aviv fears are the beginning of a third uprising known as the Intifada. Well, for Gaza's population of nearly 1.7 million living in what's been described as the world's largest open-air prison, there seems to be no end to Israeli attacks. Israeli forces have repeatedly violated the terms of a truce to end the 8-day war in November last year. 4 Palestinians have been killed and scores injured since then. From Gaza, Ashif Shannon now reports.